The final examination just became a hostage situation, and the hostage takers are protecting a spiral notebook with their lives. Chancellor Vexathul's emergency override shattered the lecture hall doors, his four eyes wide with something beyond panic. Behind him, a dozen security officers froze at the threshold, weapons lowered, staring at the impossible scene unfolding in Xenobiology 301. 3 juvenile Zarkath predators, apex species, 90% infant mortality rate, never successfully domesticated in 12,000 years of galactic record, had formed a perfect defensive perimeter around Professor Emma Johnson's desk. Their obsidian scales rippled with threat displays, razor-sharp talons scoring deep grooves into the composite flooring. Each cub massed roughly 40 kilograms of pure predatory instinct, and their golden eyes tracked every movement in the room with lethal focus. Emma Johnson sat behind her desk, red pen in hand, continuing to grade final examinations like she was in her kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. "Professor Johnson," Vexthul's voice cracked across 3 octaves. "Do not move. Please, for the love of the Founders, do not move." Emma glanced up, genuinely confused. "Chancellor, what's wrong? Did I miss a faculty meeting?" The largest cub, couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old, released a low, rumbling vocalization that made half the security team take an involuntary step backward. Its siblings flanked the desk's corners, bodies coiled, ready to launch. Between them, centered on Emma's desk like some sacred relic, sat a completely ordinary spiral notebook. Coffee-stained, dog-eared, the kind that cost 3 credits at any campus store. The notebook, Vexthul managed, his translator struggling to keep pace with his racing speech patterns. They're guarding your notebook." "Oh." Emma looked down at it, then back at the Chancellor with a small laugh. "Yeah, they've been really sweet about that. It's got my lesson plans and tomorrow's quiz answers. I asked them to watch it while I used the bathroom earlier." The silence that followed was absolute. "You asked them?" Vexthul's secondary arms began the involuntary trembling that signaled imminent neurological collapse in his species. "Professor Johnson, those are Zarkath cubs. Zarkath. They don't respond to requests. They don't guard anything except their kill sites. They certainly don't." The middle cub bared its fangs at him, a sound like tearing metal escaping its throat. Vexthul stopped talking immediately. "Security Chief," the Chancellor whispered into his comm. "Initiate Protocol Crimson. Evacuate the building, contact the Galactic Council, and someone find Ambassador Zoranix, now." "Sir." The Security Chief's voice crackled back. "Tranquilizers would harm juveniles this young. The diplomatic ramifications—" "I'm aware," Vexthul snapped. "Which is why we're not using tranquilizers. We're waiting." "Waiting for what, sir?" "For the ambassador to arrive and explain why his cubs are currently holding a human hostage in my university." Emma's head tilted. "Hostage? I'm not a hostage. I'm just waiting for everyone to calm down so I can finish grading these papers. I've got 37 exams left and they're due tomorrow." She reached for another paper. All 3 cubs shifted position instantly, maintaining their protective formation around the desk. One of them, the smallest, with distinctive copper markings along its spine, placed its foreclaw on the notebook's corner as if securing it against an invisible threat. "Don't move," Vexthul repeated, his voice now barely above a whisper. Emma paused, pen hovering over the exam. "Chancellor, I really don't understand what's happening. These 3 have been attending my lectures for 2 weeks. They're perfectly well behaved." "Attending your—" Vexthul's voice failed entirely. Through the shattered doorway, the sounds of building-wide evacuation echoed. Alarms, running feet, the organized chaos of emergency protocols engaging. Outside the lecture hall windows, security cruisers began establishing a perimeter. The holocom systems flickered to life, connecting to council emergency frequencies across 3 sectors. Vex Thul's personal comm vibrated with an incoming priority signal. He glanced at it, and what little color his species possessed drained from his face. Ambassador Zoranix is 17 minutes out, he announced to no one in particular. He wants his cubs returned unharmed. He wants explanations, and he wants to know why no one informed him that his offspring were being... He struggled with the word. Educated by a human. Emma brightened. Oh, are these his? They've been wonderful students. Very attentive. Although, she added with a slight frown, they do tend to stare at the other students a bit intensely during group discussions. The largest cub vocalized again, this time a series of clicking sounds that made the security team check their weapon safeties nervously. Emma responded without looking up. I know, sweetie. Almost done here. Then we can all go get lunch. Vex Thul's legs nearly gave out. Did that cub just communicate with you? Well, yeah. Emma's confusion seemed genuine. They've been talking to me all semester. Not in English, obviously, but we've worked out a system. 17 minutes until the ambassador arrived. 17 minutes to understand how everything they knew about Zarkath biology, predator psychology, and human limitations had apparently become catastrophically wrong. The notebook sat on the desk, utterly mundane, absolutely ordinary, and somehow the most important object in the entire sector. Pull up the security footage, Vex Thul ordered, his hands shaking as he manipulated the holographic interface. From this morning, I need to see how this started. The projection materialized above the frozen standoff. A recording from 6 hours earlier, lecture hall, empty during the break period. Emma sat at her desk, eating what appeared to be a sandwich, grading papers with her usual methodical focus. Then 3 small shapes appeared at the doorway. Cautious, curious. Freeze that, Professor Kaldra demanded, shoving through the security perimeter. The xenobiology expert's frills flared in academic outrage. Those cubs shouldn't even be on this level. The nursery facilities are... Watch, Vex Thul interrupted. The footage continued. Emma glanced up, noticed the cubs, and smiled. Actually smiled at 3 apex predators. Then she did something that made every observer's breathing stop. She broke off half her sandwich and held it out. No, Kaldra whispered. No, no, no. That's prey behavior. That's... The cubs approached. Not stalking, not hunting. Approaching. They took the offered food, looked like processed meat of some kind, and settled near her desk. Emma returned to grading, occasionally taking bites of her half, which appeared to contain nothing but plant matter and some kind of paste. She shared food with them. Kaldra's voice had gone hollow. Predators and prey sharing food. That's... Keep watching, Vex Thul said grimly. The cubs began mimicking Emma's posture. When she shifted her papers, they tilted their heads. When she stood to stretch, they stood. When she walked to the water dispenser, they followed in perfect formation, maintaining precise spacing that would make a military unit jealous. Then, Emma set her notebook on the desk, grabbed her bag, and said something to the cubs. No audio on this feed, but her mouth movements were clear. The 3 cubs immediately took positions around the desk. Defensive perimeter, professional-grade protection detail. Emma walked out of frame, heading toward the restroom facilities. The cubs didn't move, didn't play, didn't investigate the room. Just guarded. That's a trained response, the security chief breathed. That's months of conditioning. Years even. That's impossible, Kaeldra countered. You can't condition Zarkath cubs. Their neural pathways don't. He stopped. Run behavioral analysis on their formation pattern. The holographic display overlaid tactical data across the footage. The security chief's face went ashen. That's a standard galactic marine protection formation. Overlapping fields of view, mutual support positions, controlled approach vectors. Cubs don't know military tactics, Kaeldra said flatly. Cubs barely know how to hunt. They operate on pure instinct. Kill, consume, survive. They don't protect. They don't serve. His voice rose to something approaching hysteria. They certainly don't take verbal orders from prey species. Perhaps we should attempt retrieval, Vexthul suggested weakly, before the ambassador arrives. What followed was a spectacular demonstration of failure. The first drone lasted 3 seconds before the largest cub's tail strike reduced it to sparking. Components. The holographic distraction, a projected Zarkath adult with full threat display, earned nothing but dismissive glances. The food lure, carefully selected premium meat that should have been irresistible to juveniles, was ignored so completely the cubs didn't even turn their heads. They're coordinating, the security chief reported, voice tight. Each attempt, they adjust formation. They're learning our tactics and adapting. Kaeldra pulled up genetic records with trembling hands. Zarkath cubs imprint on their first kill, their first successful hunt. That's how the parent bond forms, shared predation. They should view Professor Johnson as prey, as food, not as... He gestured helplessly at the scene. Whatever this is. Back in real time, Emma tried to stand. All 3 cubs shifted, maintaining their perimeter, but allowing her complete freedom of movement within it. She walked to the water dispenser. They followed. She returned to her desk. They reformed their positions. They're treating the notebook like a clutch mother's egg cache, Vexthul realized, his academic background finally catching up with the crisis. The most sacred trust in Zarkath culture. They guard eggs with their lives until hatching. It's the only protective instinct they possess. Emma overheard this, laughed, actually laughed, and shook her head. It's got my grocery list and tomorrow's quiz answers. There's a coffee stain on page 3 and a doodle of a cat on page 7. Not exactly sacred. Professor Johnson, Kaeldra said very carefully, what exactly did you say to them when you left? Emma shrugged, unconcerned by the 12 weapons still trained on the cubs around her. Just stay and watch my stuff while I use the bathroom. Basic English. Please and thank you, you know. The silence stretched. They responded, Kaeldra finally said, to verbal commands, in English, not to pheromones, not to threat displays, not to their own species communication methods. He turned to Vexthul, his expression that of someone watching their entire field of study crumble. Chancellor, this is evolutionarily impossible. The smallest cub chirped softly. Emma reached down, scratched behind its sensory ridge, and returned to grating. The cub purred. 14 minutes until the ambassador arrived. Ambassador Zoranix materialized through the emergency transport pad, with the kind of entrance reserved for diplomatic catastrophes. His scales, darker and more elaborate than his offspring's, rippled with barely contained fury. Behind him, 6 members of the Zarkath Royal Guard fanned out, their presence announcing that this had escalated far beyond a university incident. Where are my cubs? His voice carried the resonance of apex authority. the sound that made lesser species instinctively flee. Vexthul gestured weakly toward the lecture hall. Zorinix swept through the doorway, his guard forming up behind him. He stopped dead, his massive frame going rigid at the sight before him. His 3 cubs, his heirs, blood of his blood, maintained their defensive positions around a human's desk. Around a human. They didn't even glance at him. Zyle, Cora, Thresh. The names emerged as apparent call vocalization, the specific frequency that should trigger immediate recognition in cubs. Biological imperative, genetic programming, unbreakable bond. All 3 cubs turned toward him and bared their fangs. The royal guard drew weapons. Vexthul made a strangled sound. Kyldra simply sat down on the floor, his species equivalent of fainting. Emma looked up from her papers, brightening with recognition. "Oh, are these yours? They've been really well behaved. Excellent listeners, very respectful of classroom boundaries." Zorinix's translator struggled with the cascade of emotional frequencies he was emitting. When it finally settled, all it could manage was, "You. They. What?" "I think," Vexthul said into the silence, his voice distant. "We need to convene the expert committee. Now." The holographic conference materialized within seconds. 12 of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists, behavioral specialists, and interspecies theorists, all summoned from across 3 sectors for an emergency consultation. Their faces reflected varying degrees of disbelief as they reviewed the footage. "Zarkath biology is absolute," Dr. Sinara from the Behavioral Institute stated. "Cubs protect only genetic parents until maturity. The pheromone bond is unbreakable. This footage must be falsified." "The footage is verified," Vexthul replied. 6 independent systems, all showing the same impossibility. "Then the human must have used some kind of mind control," another expert suggested. "Chemical manipulation, perhaps neural—" "Humans don't possess those capabilities," Kyldra interrupted, having recovered enough to participate. "They're classified as non-threatening social omnivores. No pheromone production, no natural chemical defenses, no predatory adaptations whatsoever." "Then how—" "Can I just grab my notebook?" Emma asked, interrupting the spiral of academic panic. "I really need to finish these grades, and standing here isn't helping anyone." "No!" The response was instantaneous, unanimous, and came from every person in the room, plus all 12 holographic experts. Emma shrugged and picked up the notebook anyway. The cubs didn't react, didn't attack, didn't even shift their weight in alarm. They simply stood, maintained their spacing, and followed Emma as she walked to the other side of the room. When she sat on the edge of a student desk, they reformed their defensive perimeter around her new position with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. "She just—" Zorinix's voice cracked completely. "This cannot—" His worldview wasn't cracking, it was shattering. Cubs bonded to kills, to blood, to the fierce pride of their first successful hunt shared with their parent. They didn't bond to prey. They didn't protect non-predators. They didn't follow across rooms like devoted students trailing a beloved teacher. Emma pulled an apple from her bag, cut it into slices with a small knife, and offered pieces to each cub. They took the fruit. Something Zarkath cubs should reject instinctively, and settled around her, chewing contentedly while maintaining their watch. "Dr. Johnson?" Vexthul's voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you do to these cubs?" Emma looked genuinely confused by the question. "I just treated them like students. They showed up to my lectures, seemed interested in the material, so I, talked to them. Said please and thank you when they did things." Basic courtesy? How long? Zoranix demanded, finding his voice. How long have they been attending your lectures? Oh, about 2 weeks now? Emma tilted her head, thinking. Yeah, first day of review sessions for finals. I assume they were authorized auditors. The administration sends observers sometimes, and I figured someone wanted to study interspecies education methods or something. One of the holographic experts simply disconnected. Another began laughing hysterically. A third started pulling up every research paper ever written on Zarkath development psychology and deleting them. 2 weeks, Kaeldra repeated. 2 weeks of verbal interaction, in English. And they've bonded to her more deeply than cubs bond to their genetic parents after months of shared hunting. The smallest cub, Thresh, apparently, chirped softly and leaned against Emma's leg. She scratched behind his sensory ridge absently, still focused on the assembled officials. Is there a problem? She asked. Everyone keeps staring at this thing, Emma said, holding up the notebook. Want to see what's so fascinating? She flipped it open before anyone could object. The first page showed standard lecture notes, bullet points on xenobiology principles, a poorly drawn diagram of cellular structures, and what appeared to be a reminder to buy milk. See? Just regular... Wait. Zoranix moved closer, his predatory instincts momentarily overridden by paternal concern. Go back. That page had... Turn to page 4. Emma complied, revealing a page covered in sketches. Crude drawings of 3 small Zarkath cubs in various poses. One sleeping curled in a ball, another stretching, a third that appeared to be laughing at something. Beneath each sketch, notes in Emma's handwriting. Subject 1. Copper markings, Thresh. Extremely curious. Investigated every corner of room. Gentler than expected with equipment. Careful with claws. Subject 2. Larger, darker scales. Protective of siblings. Positions himself between them and door. Good eye contact. Responds well to calm voice. Subject 3. Smallest. Shy initially. Stayed behind siblings. Gradually approached after 20 minutes. Very gentle taking offered food. Surprisingly soft vocalizations. You've been documenting them, Kaeldra breathed, moving to read over the ambassador's shoulder. As a case study? Emma nodded. Well, yeah. They were interesting. I've never had Zarkath students before, and their behavior didn't match the literature at all. She flipped through more pages. See here? Day 3, I noticed they seemed stressed when the halls got crowded between classes. Lots of aggressive posturing, defensive positioning. So I started letting them wait in the back corner during transitions. Zoranix's claws trembled as he turned another page. Day 5. Cubs much calmer today. Gave them the quiet corner again. They settled immediately. Brought extra blanket from my office. They curled up on it during lecture. Other students fascinated, but I reminded everyone to give them space. Important. Cubs seem overstimulated by chaos. Need predictability? The socialization training, Zoranix said, his voice barely audible. We had them in the Cultural Integration Center. Rotating environments, constant new stimuli, different handlers each session. We've always thought that cubs needed exposure to chaos to develop proper aggressive responses for survival. Emma's expression shifted to something between sympathy and exasperation. You were stress testing babies? We were preparing them for a hostile galaxy. By making them hostile first. Emma shook her head. Chancellor, can I show him page 12? Vexthul nodded mutely. The page contained a longer entry, dated 1 week prior. Cubs arrived during office hours today, clearly distressed. Thresh was hyperventilating, if that's the right term. The larger one really need to learn their actual names. was pacing, aggressive tail strikes. Smallest one just shaking, asked what was wrong. Obviously they couldn't answer, but the body language was clear. Overwhelmed. Let them stay. Dim the lights. Put on soft background music. Classical. They seemed to like it. Just sat with them. After an hour, all three were calm. Fell asleep in a pile near my desk. Stayed late to let them rest. This classroom has become their safe space. That's actually really sad. What are they being put through in their regular program? The silence in the room was absolute. The notebook, Zoranik said, his voice breaking. They're not guarding a possession. They're guarding their sanctuary. This room represents safety, one of the holographic experts added, their academic detachment crumbling. Predictability, gentleness, everything their official training lacks. They're defending their emotional refuge. Emma looked at the three cubs, understanding dawning in her expression. Oh, sweethearts, you were just scared. Thresh chirped softly, pressing closer to her leg. Zoranik sank to the floor, a gesture of complete submission in his culture. We've been training them wrong. For millennia, we've been doing this wrong. We thought aggression had to be taught, reinforced, cultivated through stress. He looked up at Emma. But you showed them gentleness, and they became this. Protective, loyal, controlled. Well, yeah, Emma said, scratching behind Thresh's sensory ridge. They're babies. Babies need predictability and gentleness, security before you can teach them anything else. It's basic developmental psychology. The Galactic Council Expert Committee erupted into chaos. Half the participants were already pulling up research databases, frantically rewriting protocols. The other half were in heated debate about methodology, evolution, and the fundamental assumptions underlying 12,000 years of Zarkath child-rearing practices. Zoranix stood slowly, regaining some composure. Professor Johnson, I formally request that you retain custody of my cubs for the remainder of this academic term. Emma raised an eyebrow. Only if they actually enroll and do the homework. I don't run a daycare, Ambassador. All three cubs tilted their heads, vocalizing softly, a questioning sound. Emma turned to them, her tone matter-of-fact. Yes, you three. I'm talking about you. If you're going to keep attending my class, you're going to be actual students. No freeloading in my classroom. 3 distinct chirps of acknowledgement. Zoranix stared. They understand complex English, conditional statements, abstract concepts like freeloading? Well, I've been talking to them for 2 weeks. Emma shrugged. They're smart cookies. Probably smarter than half my regular students, honestly. The largest cub, Cora, made a sound that was unmistakably amused. Emma grinned. See? They've even got a sense of humor. The emergency protocols dissolved within the hour. What remained was paperwork, mountains of it, and a complete restructuring of everything the Galactic University thought it understood about interspecies education. Professor Emma Johnson, Vexthul announced formally, though his voice still carried traces of existential shock, is hereby officially assigned the position of Cultural Integration Specialist, effective immediately. Her salary will be substantial. Emma looked up from the enrollment forms she was helping the cubs fill out. Does this come with better office hours? Because Tuesday, Thursday mornings are terrible for my schedule. Whatever you want, Professor. The cubs were registered in the system 10 minutes later. Wazil, Cora, and Thresh, officially auditing Xenobiology 3001. Their species classification required 3 levels of administrative override and a direct signature from the Galactic Education Board, but by sunset, It was done. The notebook, coffee-stained, dog-eared, completely mundane, was transported to the campus archives under security escort. It would be preserved as a historical document, the artifact that changed galactic understanding of apex predator development. Emma made a photocopy first, muttering about still needing her actual lesson plans. "I'm establishing a new department," Vex Thul declared, addressing the assembled faculty and the still connected council members. "Human-led interspecies development. Professor Johnson will chair it, naturally." "I don't want to chair anything," Emma interjected. "I just want to teach xenobiology and go home at reasonable hours." "We'll discuss terms." Ambassador Zoranix approached Emma as she packed her bag, his massive frame somehow deferential. "Professor Johnson, I must formally request your presence on the Zarkath homeworld. Our entire training system requires reformation. You've demonstrated methodologies we never imagined possible." Emma considered this. "Sure, but I'll need summers off. And they better have decent coffee. The real stuff, not that synthetic garbage the cafeteria serves. We will import entire plantations, if necessary." "Then we have a deal." Emma stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. The three cubs immediately moved to her side, and with surprising coordination, they gripped the bag straps in their teeth, distributing its weight between them. "Okay, guys," Emma said, starting toward the door. "Cafeteria next. I'm starving. But remember, no eating the other students. We talked about this." 3 chirps of acknowledgement, remarkably similar to exasperated teenagers. The walk across campus became an impromptu parade. Students emerged from buildings, faculty crowded windows, and by the time Emma reached the cafeteria, she had accumulated a following of roughly 40 people, all watching the impossible scene of 3 Zarkath cubs trotting alongside a human professor like domesticated pets. Galactic news feeds exploded within the hour. Human accidentally revolutionizes apex predator development. Zarkath cubs bond with teacher, experts stunned. Everything we knew about predator psychology, wrong. A reporter caught Emma coming out of the cafeteria, microphone extended. "Professor Johnson, the galaxy wants to know, how did you achieve what millennia of Zarkath tradition couldn't?" Emma, halfway through a sandwich, blinked at the camera. "I just didn't want them stressed during exam week. Finals are hard enough without adding territorial anxiety to the mix." The clip went viral across 12 sectors. 2 days later, campus life had adjusted to its new normal, with the remarkable adaptability institutions develop when faced with the impossible becoming routine. Emma sat on the lawn outside the xenobiology building, red pen flying across papers, the afternoon sun warm on her shoulders. The 3 cubs sprawled around her in a loose perimeter, each focused on their own data pad. Actual homework assignments Emma had modified for their developmental level. Thresh was working through basic social dynamics theory. Cora had a case study on pack behavior. Zil was annotating a reading on emotional regulation in high-stress environments. Thresh suddenly stood, trotted to the flower beds near the building, and carefully, so carefully, pulled a small flower free. He carried it back, dropped it in Emma's lap with obvious pride. The flower was slightly mangled, petals askew, stem bent. Perfect. "Thank you, sweetie," Emma said, genuinely touched. "That's very thoughtful." 3 purrs vibrated through the air, a sound that should have been threatening but somehow conveyed nothing but contentment. Inside the building, Vex Thul watched from his office window, Kaeldra standing beside him. The xenobiology professor had spent the last 48 hours rewriting his entire curriculum. "We classified them wrong," Vexthul said quietly. The cubs, sir? Kaldra asked, still watching the scene below. The humans. On the lawn, Emma set down her pen and stretched. All right, who wants to study for tomorrow's quiz? It's on pack behavior dynamics. Ironically, appropriate given current circumstances. All three cubs vocalized enthusiastically, abandoning their datapads to crowd closer. Emma laughed, the sound carrying across the quad. The irony is not lost on me. Trust me. Okay, question 1. Define the role of the pack leader in establishing safety parameters for juvenile members. The cubs settled in, golden eyes fixed on Emma with absolute attention. And if anyone had told the Galactic Council 6 months ago that this scene would be possible. 3 apex predator cubs studying pack dynamics, with a human teacher on a university lawn like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. They would have been referred for a psychological evaluation. But here, in the late afternoon sun, with a slightly mangled flower resting on a stack of graded papers and the sound of Emma's patient voice explaining complex social theories to 3 cubs who hung on her every word, it was just another Tuesday. Vexthul turned from the window, pulling up his communications interface. He had approximately 600 requests for interviews, 15 research proposals, and 43 universities asking if they could implement similar human-led integration programs. He started with the easiest response, approving Emma's request for better office hours. It seemed like the least he could do for the professor who had accidentally rewritten galactic understanding of apex predator psychology by treating scared babies like scared babies. In the archives, 3 floors below, a coffee-stained spiral notebook sat in a temperature-controlled display case, already being studied by scholars across a dozen worlds. On page 7, barely visible between lecture notes and grocery lists, was a small doodle of a cat. Emma had been right. Not exactly sacred. But somehow, in the end, it had become exactly that.